Hello and welcome to my manga coloring tutorial. This is a panel from a series called The Climber, and I use that for this demonstration because it didn't take me too long, but it also helps me get my ideas across. Um, so this color was done in Krita, and this is a time lapse I made just to show you guys the process. Um, Krita is just like a free, open source program you can buy to make any art you really want. I mean, you could buy it or you can download it, but it's convenient for me. Later on in this video, I use Photoshop, but that's not required. That's only because I use the certain like tools like the linear dodge add brush for effects and lighting, but that's not really necessary. So just jumping right into it, just to like explain the background for this. So before I made this color, what I did was I made a reference sheet, and you'll see it a couple times throughout the video. It just has a bunch of pictures that I collected from whether it be fan art or from official volume covers or whatever, and you'll see me like going through as I go through the color, you'll see me switch back and forth because it's always good to reference and it's always good to make a sheet of references. And what also helps is just color dropping using the little eyedrop tool and just color dropping colors and stealing and just playing around with it and see what works. What you're looking at now on the screen where it says flats is just like a rough mock-up. It's just like a rough idea of what I wanted the color to look like. So yeah, I was just messing around with colors, just trying to get the right tone, keeping consistency with the colors, and that's just something that I'll look back on just to give me like a rough idea of what I want this to look like. So it kind of influences things like lighting, just general colors, maybe even shading, stuff like that. But it's by no means an accurate like representation of what the final product is going to look like. Um, what you'll see here on the right side, it says multiply, so that's basically what controls the layers. And that's what like setting it's at. So multiply basically means that if you are using a brush and then you go over it with, you go over it again, it'll like add to it so it can make it darker. And that's what you want if you want to make like things darker. It's really useful for shading. Um, and then right next to size and opacity on the top is go to the left a little bit. It says normal. So pretty much the actual layer itself is on a multiply layer, but the brush itself, because that's the brush setting, on the top, which is normal. So basically, what that makes it is really useful for the flat stage because it's pretty much makes it so that you can use the brush and color in like an area or whatever, but you could go over it in the same spots and it won't overlap. So it's really useful for like just quick colors. And now we'll just start the time lapse. So you could see me going around with the polygonal selection tool, which is basically this little tool. It's in the bottom left corner next to the lasso tool. And you can see me, and it basically makes it so that you just click on the points that you want to select, and then that makes it so that you can just color in the selected area, and it makes it really easy. Um, so yeah, just pick the right colors that you want, and then you just go in those areas with that. And then you don't have to worry about anything overlapping because the brush is set to normal, but the layer is set to a multiply layer. So this is just the flat stage. You're just trying to get like the general colors down, just the feel of everything. And it's good to put this on a separate layer so that you can, if you make a mistake, you can see I make some mistakes here, but it's good because you can go back and change it later. So that's really important. It's good to just like take your time with this, but you can do it pretty fast once you get the hang of it. Yeah, just constantly referring back to the reference sheet and the mock-up that I made. It's just easier to make a mock-up, so you just spend less time figuring out what you want. You can just jump right into it when you want to do the final thing, and you just put random colors, whatever you block it out. And here I'm just using the tool to select the colors that I want, where I want them to go. I'm just playing around with coloring options, just seeing where I want things to go. and I still haven't made it to the skin yet, but just making sure everything looks cohesive. I'm not worrying about effects or shading or anything just yet. That's in the next step. So this takes a while. It's just messing around with the settings and just seeing what works. And it's good to take your time because if you have good flats, um, then everything else will be good. It's best to definitely have a good foundation because if you have a lacking foundation, like a bad set of flats, um, then your shading and your lighting might suffer in the end. And you don't want to have to go back and have to rework all those things. Um, and the more you color and the more you do flats, you get better at it. But shading and lighting is not really that much of a concern. Um, but it kind of can be if you're not the type of colorist who wants to uh, use all these like crazy effects or whatever. But yeah, definitely the multiply brush and the normal brush, multiply layer and the normal brush settings are really important. Uh, the lasso tool and the polygonal selection tool are also super helpful. You can see me like adjusting my size, the size of brush and everything, but the opacity stays the same because the opacity of my brush is at 100, but if you go down, then since the layer is set to a multiply, it will have them start to overlap. But since the opacity is at 100, it'll make it so that the colors don't overlap. It just looks like one smooth, continuous color. You can see me. You don't have to be really perfect with the selections using the rectangular polygonal selection tool um, because it just doesn't really matter. You can always smooth over it later, but it's best to work out all the kinks in the flat stage first. Just adding general shading, very basic stuff. Picking the colors that you want. Color dropping is super important. Referencing is always super important. And yeah, just trying to like understand like what kind of feel you want for the piece is super. That's really useful, and it saves you time too. So I would definitely recommend that step. And I'm making this tutorial because I wanted to make something kind of straightforward because I've been doing this for like 5 years and I really can't stand like how ambiguous or how all over the place a lot of other tutorials are. I mean, this looks kind of hard, but I'm really only using a few tools, mainly the lasso tool and the polygonal selection tool, just to apply my flats. And also the thing is, if your brush is set to normal and your layers are on multiply and your opacity is at 100, you can always override the color. You can always just go over the color with another color, and then it'll make it look like one continuous thing. So you don't have to worry about any like ugly overlaps or anything like that. It makes it way easier to handle, and it'll result in a much cleaner piece. So here I'm just going to continue the flats and I'm deciding what to do with the snow. I'm going around the face. Basically, whatever color you put down with this multiply layer and a normal brush, it overlaps over the color, so makes it really convenient for putting down the flats. Yeah, just selecting all around, just cutting around the snow, whatever, and just making sure everything looks uniform so that it looks a lot more cohesive when you put the effects down. And it's okay, so see, you can hear me, you can see me doing, just making rough shapes around the background, tracing around the character, because those rough shapes won't really matter, because later on you can smooth them out with a blending tool, which is next to the brush presets on the bottom right. Mainly just using like a soft brush and a hard brush. Soft brush is more useful for shading, which is the next step, and the hard brush is really good for flats because it's very, you know, decisive. And the lasso tool is super helpful. So those are some good takeaways that I've learned at least. So this is the shading section. Basically, what you'll see me do here is I will make a new layer, right? And I'll set the layer to multiply, and I'll set the brush to multiply because now you want them to overlap. So I'll just select the areas that I want with the lasso tool, and I'll just start coloring in the areas that I think, you know, would be shaded, where the light would be going. And you can be kind of liberal, or you can be kind of, it's good to be intentional with it. See, I kind of go kind of heavy on the shading where the light is the least. Um, because it's naturally you want the light to kind of um, what I would do is I would put the shading more, and then I would see where the light is cut out. So shadows are really important, especially in this pose because his arm is reaching over. So it's good to just like have everything have a shadow of its own, but it has to kind of make sense. So that's why it's really good to have reference. You can see me getting experimental with it. I'm using blues and hues of purple since it's like a snowy kind of area. And yeah, just using this polygonal selection tool is super helpful, and then just shading within those areas. Once again, literally just using the soft brush and like kind of a low opacity, and just shading in those like gray areas. One or two times. It's like you're painting a wall pretty much. So yeah, just shading the areas where the shadows you think would be the deepest. And just being convenient because it's good to be really efficient with these kinds of things, and you just want to repeat this step. So basically, you just want to use a multiply brush and just go in the areas where you think the shadows would be the heaviest. I'm not really using too many colors. Basically, I'm just color dropping using the eyedrop tool on the area that I want to color, and I'm just going to take the color and I'm just going to increase the opacity a little bit, and then I'm just going to continuously go over it so it gives that illusion of volume. And then I hit on the legs because the shadow would be overreaching over him, onto his legs. And then later I'll add a shadow onto the snow because, he's, over the snow. So try to like put like smoother gradients on the arms because you want to get that illusion of volume, right? So more in the bag and stuff, and on the zippers because zippers have depth. Everything has depth, and you really want to reinforce that idea because it really sells like the reality of it. So here I use like yellow tones and stuff on the hood, and I use gray too to kind of you gotta experiment. It's trial and error. Here I selected the whole helmet and I just hit it with various shades of gray and dark blues. Um, you don't want to use oversaturated colors. So you don't really want to use anything too out there. So because it'll just make it look off. It'll make it look really off, and it's just kind of gross to look at. Unless that's the style you're going for, but this is kind of a more realistic sort of style I was going for. But yeah, try to avoid super saturated colors. And what I typically do is I go for more muted colors, um, and then I just work around them and just add onto them and smooth them out as you go. Um, I don't know if it was super visible, but I use the blur tool a little bit, so it's like this like little smudge tool. It's like a cotton swab kind of looking icon, and then you use that around the edges to smooth it out. And then basically creates this like softer kind of look around like hard edges. So this is the effect stage. Here you can see me lasso tooling. That's like your best friend. I'm just smoothing it out with that like cotton brush tool, whatever. And then yeah, I'm just kind of like creating that like illusion of like wind or whatever. And then yeah, so I'm just gonna like go over. Made some more layers, and I'm just Krita actually has a lot of like cool effects brushes, so I'm just playing around with that. You see, I just put that shadow. It's just a darker blue color. Um, so yeah, mainly the shading is pretty much done, but I'm just putting like particle effects and and the snow. Definitely, there's a lot of cool brushes that really help sell that like snowy kind of wind feeling um, that the climber's going through. So I made sure to put that on a different layer. Everything really should be on a different layer. Anything that matters at least. Um, Let me just pause it for a second. With skin tones, skin colors especially, what I like to do is just put a skin color that I think would fit, and then in these kind of areas around the jaw or whatever, um, I'll use like a brown. Typically a brown. It really depends on the character I'm working on, but I'll use the polygonal selection tool and rough out the shapes around the characters, and then put like a brown, and then I'll start applying light shades of pink, um, and then that kind of gets that like warm hue on the skin, and then after that, it's pretty much just all about trying to get that illusion of depth again, and then just smoothing it out and just adding and just like chipping away at it. And then, I added some purple to his lips from some of the reference images because it's cold. And basically anything you can do that sells that kind of illusion that, you know, it really immerses the person who's looking at it. They get the idea that they're looking at a real person climbing, I guess. So you want to get good at just paying attention to the small things and really paying attention to them and observing them. And then that is what's going to end up, and just trial and error, because nothing's perfect. And then eventually that will end up selling the piece. Um, and that's really important. But once again, it's all trial and error and reference, color dropping, and just I think being more observant about how you look at the world definitely plays a huge role. And just playing with unconventional colors too, and using those in spots you may not have thought possible. So here I'm still messing in Krita with the brushes, and I like to add like an extra layer of like lighting or whatever. So yeah, here's just some messing around, seeing what works. It's just trial and error pretty much, right? So yeah, just trying to get that like, different shades of snow. I was looking at a lot of ice, seeing, screen tones. That's a big thing. So another thing with screen tones in Krita, pretty much one easy way to do it is to put it on a normal layer. So your brush will be normal, right? And then you apply it over the area you want the screen tones, and then you go up here, so to filter, and then you go to artistic. I'm sorry if it was fast, but it said artistic, right? And then it'll apply a screen tone over that, and then you have options to pick from. And then I was seeing which one worked, but I realized didn't really work for the scenario. So what I did was I went down here and I selected the screen tone brush, which pretty much does it. It does the screen tones, these little dots in the form of a brush. And then I just picked this like orange color, and I made a new layer on color dodge, and that basically just makes it kind of glow a little bit. That's all you really need to know about color dodge. And then just to like kind of give that fading effect, I picked an eraser brush right here, and then I just smoothed it out so it looks like, it's appearing where the light is hitting it the most. Adding more effects, really it's the bottom set of the brushes in Krita, and quick comment. Yeah, so there you go, and then just throwing more effects on it, just seeing what works. Um, Smoothing everything out and just kind of trusting the process. That's a big part of it. It honestly, my main goal is not to make it look super realistic, but just to make it look cool. So here I'm throwing it to Photoshop, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make a new layer. I just right click on the layer that was present over here, so layer 0, right? And then I click new layer. I make that the one with the one that's having its effects put on it, which is, you can tell because it has the eyeball. Um, and then I'm just gonna pick a brush that makes sense, whatever, and then I'm just using the burn tool a little bit, and then I pick this brush on the top. Sorry about the zoom ins, it's kind of weird, but or the lack thereof. The linear dodge add brush, it's next to it's under type and layer, and then that is the brush that I'm using, and that gives kind of like a cool glow when you select a color. So I use that mainly for the background, just to give that like kind of that lighting that makes sense. And then also, sorry to keep pausing, but I picked a cool blue because um, you want to pick complementary colors that work with the background. Like you wouldn't want to pick a red sort of lighting scheme for a character completely in blue, but it really depends what you're trying to go for. Again, this is just how I do it, and this is just the way I thought it looked better. It looked better. So you just see me playing around with the linear dodge add brush and just applying different colors, trying to get some shines, and using a softer brush. And that gives this cool like lighting effect. Um, just messing around with it a bit more, and then I was like, what if orange worked? But I don't think it worked as well. Pink, it didn't work as well. Just messing around with soft brushes, and what did I do? I put a orange hue using linear dodge add brush inside the actual glasses themselves. Um, that made it look good for sure, I think. And I think it's done. Yeah, it's about done. So here's the finished product. Took about 5 hours, condensed into what, 13 minutes. But this whole video is probably gonna be a bit longer. Um, I think we're close to like 20 minutes now. But yeah, so this is like a brief coloring tutorial, just kind of like showing my step-by-step process. Even though it was kind of hard, I think it was a bit easier to follow than a lot of other tutorials. To sum everything up, basically what I did was I threw it into Krita, and then I applied the flats, and then I messed around with the shading a bit using the actually no, before I even go into that, the flats I used mainly the polygonal selection tool, the lasso tool, and a multiply layer with a normal brush, and I used the hard brush. Um, I made a reference sheet which I went back and forth between, and I made a mock-up. Highly recommend making a mock-up, just like block out the colors and see what you want. And then I did a shading section, which is where you do all the real, that's the real nitty-gritty work. The effects are not as important as the shading, where I basically just went in the depth, the deepest parts with, for example, the jacket. When I was trying to color shade the jacket, I picked the color of the jacket, but just a bit of a deeper green, and I just went in those crevices and just colored it in, and just kept lowering the opacity, basically treating it like an airbrush almost. So you get that impression that like the shadow is really strong, and then it kind of fades out. um, and then I used the burn tool and stuff like that, and then I applied the effects, which you can do in Krita, same thing, but I find that in Photoshop it works a lot better because I'm just more used to it. Um, and I just used the linear dodge add brush. I duplicate the layer, it was on a multiply setting, and I use a multiply brush on the linear dodge add um, brush thing. Just made some use of screen tones, and all the brushes that were used in this video were um, not like outside brushes. They were all part of Krita when I got it, so I just took advantage of what it had and just reference and practice. And I don't know. I might make a video explaining the more intricate details of coloring. We'll see. But anyways, I hope this was helpful to someone. I mean, I know I had fun making it, and I found that this was something that I kind of felt like I had to do. So if this was helpful to anybody, well, I'm glad I could help, and I might make more. So thank you for watching, and have a good one.